Hi, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager.
And I'm Brian Michael. That clip you saw at the top of the show is from the new Steven Spielberg movie, Ready Player One. Movie I was very excited to see because usually with Spielberg he does a serious movie and a fun movie, so sometimes you get Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. And this time we're getting The Post, Ready Player One, or perhaps we're getting, what was it, Jurassic Park 2 and Amistad, so you never know what you're going to kind of get sometimes in the same year. This one tells a story of actually the Oasis, which is, this film is set in the future, and the Oasis is a large video game virtual reality land where all the gamers go into, and the creator of this world has passed away and has left keys and Easter eggs behind for those who will find them, get the keys of the kingdom. And of course there's a large evil corporation that's trying to stop everyone, and of course there's a young man who's not the one. I was really happy it wasn't a Matrix-y theme, that it was going to be some, you're the one to be able to do it. He just actually knows the life story of the creator and is able to follow that closely and able to figure out some of the Easter eggs along the way.
He's the biggest nerd of them all.
He's the biggest nerd of them all, but I was so happy. I'm like, oh, if they say he's the one, I'm not going to be really happy about this. And what you've got here is probably middle of the road Spielberg. It's well made. So in terms of a big, huge explosions and a lot of adventure, there's a great chase scene at the very beginning of the film where all of the gamers are racing along and are having King Kong chase them. And a lot of times we see these type of things where there's a lot of quick cutting and you don't know where you are. The entire time in this one, I actually knew where I was. There's a lot of zooming in, a lot of reverse angles, but you still kept track of exactly where you were. So that made it really exciting and it was really nice to see.
Well, that's because there's no people in that scene.
But
it's easier to do when there's no real people.
Is it? Because I've seen a lot of times where there's a lot of special effects and they're not. So that was really nice to see at the very beginning. And if there's anything that's of nutritional value in this film, it's that piece right there. And I wish a lot of blockbuster directors would see this part and watch this, and a lot of editors would see how you can actually keep track. So I really enjoyed that. Other than that, there's a girl that he likes. There's some friends that he has in the virtual world that warn him, you don't know what the people are actually going to look like in real life, and so you immediately assume that these people are not who they are. Mm-hmm. And we get to meet them along the way, and it's kind of fun, and there's the 5 of them. They kind of make a little team that goes in there. And it's an enjoyable movie. A little long.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. God, why is it 2.5 hours? Why is it 2.5 hours? I never understand why all these movies are being 2.5 hours. But I can give it a pass, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can't give it a pass. I thought this movie was really dull. Multiple things. So yeah, the action sequences are fine, but it just felt like I was watching a video game because they're not the real people, obviously. The real people, when you're in the real world, he spends very little time there, and you don't get any setup. I mean, this guy's supposed to have this really hard life, and that's why he's escaping. You get one scene.
Sure.
With his aunt's boyfriend, and that's it. Ty Sheridan, who is a great young actor we've seen in other films and really liked him in, here just does nothing for me. He has no personality at all. He's just totally blank to me. Olivia Cooke has the most personality of anyone on the screen as the Artemis, as the female friend, and they give her a lot more to do than they normally do for the girlfriend role or the love interest. So I liked that. She's actually got some motivation. She has more of a backstory than he does. She's got real motivation to be in the Oasis and to fight the corporation, and her motivation really comes out. So I actually thought her story was stronger than his, which was kind of a nice, refreshing change of pace. But then all the references throughout the movie, which I know were in the book, it's like a very 80s nostalgia thing, got really tiresome to me, especially because one of the things they do is there's this one part where she does this thing with Alien, a reference to the movie Alien. And then I thought, oh, Alien, that's a great movie. I kept bringing me out of the movie and thinking about, I wish I was watching Alien right now. And then it's like, then they do The Shining, and then there's multiple references to Citizen Kane. And the problem with constantly referencing movies and work that's better than yours is I kept kind of in my head going, boy, I really wish I was watching one of these things that was better.
That Shining sequence, though, to have it down to where, it was it was the carpet, and it was the wallpaper, and of course then they're going to go into this scene, which is a very famous scene, but there's nudity in the scene. I'm like, how are we going to do this in PG-13? How are we going to do this? What is going on, and why is it this character? I really enjoyed. No, some of that's
The
just a lot of
Shining was
fun.
kind of a nice homage, but there was also a part of me that thought, okay, here we go, Spielberg again, and his love of Kubrick, and not measuring up. But yeah, to me, it just seemed very tiresome. And maybe if it had been a half an hour to 40 minutes shorter, I could have excused it a little bit more. But by the end, I was so bored. I was just like, oh, when is this movie going to be over?
I look forward to the YouTube video that someone's going to put together. And somebody will, probably be next of kin. That'll be like the 180 Easter eggs in this movie, and I will watch them all. And I will watch them all. I do enjoy that. Once the movie's out on video, that someone always does this video where they will point out all of the little things in there, and it's a lot of fun because I know that there's a Chucky scene. Actually, it was a really good Chucky scene in this movie. And that's the first Child's
Chucky
Play.
wasn't one of the better references.
Yes.
See, the goofy
was funny.
80s references were kind of funny. It was just when they brought up things that are actually really, really good that I thought, oh, Alien. Oh, yeah, that's a great movie. And then I'm thinking about Alien for like 5 minutes. And so,
at the very least, if it inspires people to go see The Iron Giant, it hasn't done a bad thing.
I guess, but I'm giving it 2 stars. So anyway,
Yeah.
so not a
Shocker.
total. Well, it's not a 0-star or 1-star.
But you know what? In terms of those special effects, because it's a Spielberg movie, it is done very well. I mean, it does feel like the people actually have weight. It doesn't look cheap as they normally do in other films. There is the blue.
Well, it's
blue
all.
silver
It's
I don't
yeah,
like
it looks really
so much,
blue, and it looks just like a video
didn't-
game. I mean, it's fine if you want to watch a video game for
I
two
just
and a half
thought that
hours.
was a little bit as a notch above, and so that's kind of nice to see. So
Okay.
yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next movie, which is actually from a list of the Oscar-nominated films that Angela and I are working our way through. Because some point in some night that we were like, hey, I haven't seen this movie that was nominated for Best Picture. We should see this movie. I've heard about this one. Why don't we put it on a list and then make ourselves watch it? And then months later we go, why are we watching this movie again? So this is from 1942. This is King 1942, directed by Sam Wood. It tells the story of several friends actually in a little small town where tragedy strikes with one of them actually losing his legs, and without giving away big spoilers, and just kind of showing their lives in the small town. It stars Ronald Reagan is actually his best performance, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
That's not a sentence I normally say a lot, but he's actually good.
Yeah, no,
He's
he's
serviceable
fine.
in this film.
He's fine.
What I found
He's
really,
fine.
what I found really interesting in this film is it's Sam Wood who directed this, who has quite a eclectic work of art in terms of like For Whom the Bell Tolls, Pride of the Yankees, which was nominated the same year as this one was for Best Picture. He's done that. He did that twice. He had the Devil, Mrs. Jones. He actually was one of the uncredited directors for Gone with the Wind.
Oh, wow.
He had Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Day at the Races, Night at the Opera.
So he did several with Marx Brothers, and
yeah,
he
I
was
did a
kind of
couple
known
Marx
for being a
Brothers.
comedic director in part because of his work with the Marx
But
Brothers.
he kind of does like the best years of our lives type of movies. These kind of like little our town pictures or biopics that are
That's
kind
right,
of
as a
like
studio director.
yeah, but they're kind of crowd pleasers and nothing totally offensive with it. I enjoyed this movie. I did like the character's journey.
Oh, you did like it?
I did
I
like
thought it was pretty corny.
It had a little bit of it reminded me a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life in terms of his his little story of trying to get out of the town and coming back and I did
It's
enjoy
kind of that mixed with Best Years of Our Lives. And,
Yeah.
And of course it shows how the small town, it sort of has this element of, oh, they're a bunch of hypocrites, because they love this guy until, he has a disability and then he's kind of the fallen hero. But, the acting was a little bit cheesy, except for the Ann Sheridan, who is weirdly, she's a big star and she is really, really good in this movie. But compared to all the other actors around her, she kind of is so heads and tails above them. To me, she stuck out because of that. Now, cinematography was done by James Wong Howe, who is a really, famous, notable cinematographer who was known for doing a lot of film noir, did Sweet Smell of Success, and he actually was nominated for cinematography in this film, but I don't think it's his most notable cinematography, so that's kind of interesting that he was nominated.
It's a beautiful black and white look film.
I mean, it
there.
looks great, yeah, and it's definitely, I don't know, it was just a little too hokey and dated for me, so it's like a 2.5 star movie to me, but and Ronald Reagan, he was fine, but yeah, it was. If this is it was by far every time you look up this movie, if you look up King's Row, the first thing that comes up is Ronald Reagan's best performance. So it's kind of funny.
Well, there was. Can you name the other ones that were the runner-ups?
I don't know, something with chimps. That's all I know. I haven't seen his other movies. Have you seen his bad movies?
No, but I was alive in the '80s. No, No, actually, it was a good performance.
Those were good.
Too.
That was a good
It was a
performance
good
in the
performance
80s.
in the 80s.
But, it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director, which is kind of notable for 1942 that this movie was nominated for Best Picture because there's a lot of good movies in 1942. So the Academy, once again, showing that they're not always the wisest when it comes to picking.
It's the usual kind of, like you said, it's a studio picture. You can tell they kind of cobbled things together. Got this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this is
It
what
looks a little
it's gonna be.
cobbled together.
They really pushed his
There's like 4
performance
different
forward
movies
hers.
going on in this movie because it's somewhere there's this other side relationship with this other woman, and then there's the whole thing with her parents, and anyway, it's complicated. Okay, so we'll move on. So our next movie is Loveless, and we have a clip for you to take a look at. Okay, you saw a clip for Loveless, and this is a film about a couple who are going through a really ugly divorce, and things only get worse when their son disappears. Now, this is by a really notable Russian filmmaker whose name I'm not going to butcher on the show, but you can look him up easily if you look up this movie. He's done 3 other films before this that I've seen: The Return, Leviathan, and Elena, which are all excellent. Leviathan in particular is a masterpiece, and Loveless is right up there with some of his best work. It sounds, this is not an easy watch, though. This is a really hard movie to watch. These are not likable characters, but they are complex. So, a lot of his films have been very focused on critiques of the new Russian middle class, people who are more focused on money and capitalism and themselves, really. In the case of this movie, they're particularly interested in themselves. The mother and father are both totally self-focused. They're so interested in what's going on with their own. They're both having kind of extramarital affairs that are involved in the divorce. The father has impregnated another woman. The mother has moved on to a relationship with a new man, and they're so into that they just are totally, have no clue what's going on with their son, and they have paid no attention to him whatsoever. But the Loveless theme goes much deeper than that, because at some point we meet the mother's mother, and we see that this is generational, that this lack of love is something that's been passed on. And I think, again, to a critique that the director, I think, is trying to make about the very fabric. It reminds me a little bit, we reviewed earlier this year Graduation, the Romanian film, which was also about sort of like bad morals being passed down from generation to generation. In a way, that's what this film is about. Instead of morals per se, it was this just total lack of love in families and in relationships being passed on. And there's this constant kind of thread throughout the film of everyone being on their phones, and you see people in the background taking selfies. And he's very critical of, I think, when we think of Russia, I think we think of Russia, the old Russian films, Eisenstein, we think of, the communist films of the past, but he is very much documenting the Russia of now.
So this was nominated, now I didn't get to see this film because of scheduling conflicts, but this was nominated for Best Foreign Film, so it was actually nominated by the Russian government. I mean, that was the movie they put forward.
I know, which is sort of surprising a little
really
bit, because it's definitely not
critical.
Very, I mean, you could just take it as a domestic movie and that it's not critical of society, except for the fact that everyone in the film is sort of complicit in what's happening with this young man. I mean, there's a search and rescue team that goes out and tries to find him.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you don't really see anyone that seems to care about anything other than themselves, or making money, or what's going on in their phone, or taking photos to make themselves look good on social media. The mother in particular, she's constantly taking photos of her meals and wherever she is, just to try to post it and make herself, but you can tell she's miserable. So that's the irony of it, is, of course, that she's miserable, that she's taking these photos to show, to try to make people believe she's happy.
I do remember in the trailer that the boy hadn't gone to school in 2 days.
Right.
So he had been missing 2 days
Before
them knowing.
They didn't know. Yeah, they were both staying over at the partner's house, and that's a whole other thing, because they're both pointing fingers. For their first thing when they're confronted with this is not to worry about him, is to point fingers at each other. She blames him for not being around. He blames her for not being around. So it's definitely not, and I know I'm making it sound like a super fun time, but there's really no way to get around it. I can't play this up other than it's a great film, and if you just love great filmmaking, he's got a wonderful visual style. He has these wonderful long shots of the icy trees in Russia, and just gorgeous cinematography. So if you just want to see great cinema, then this is a good movie to see.
You've been
So,
really into the downer movies lately, might I add.
what can I say? But
What
I've
was
liked
the-
all of his. And this is
Yeah.
4 great films in a row. So I mean, this
I've only seen
director
a
is
couple of
just
those.
yeah.
I remember Leviathan.
Leviathan, yeah, and
for
The
certain.
Return and Elena are worth seeing too. Just excellent. So definitely worth seeing.
Very cool.
But really shifting gears away from a great film, we'll move on to our next movie, which is actually our new segment. We have a new segment here on Real Film Snobs. I think this was Brian's brainchild concoction. It's called How Bad Is It? And in this segment, we are exploring not just classically bad movies, not movies that are, or directors that are known for being bad like Ed Wood. This is a segment where we are exploring films by great filmmakers. So these are filmmakers who are known for making masterpieces of cinema, but this is a film that was considered bad when it came out. And we're re-examining it years later and saying, how bad was it really? Because sometimes movies can be considered bad when they first come out for different reasons. And then later
Gates
on,
of Heaven.
Gates of Heaven is a good example, where they reevaluate them and people go, oh wait, this actually wasn't as bad as we thought it was. So our first contender for this new segment is Quintet from 1979 by director Robert Altman, one of my favorite directors of all time. And set in a future ice age where humans play a game called Quintet, but one group of people are playing to the death. The film stars Paul Newman. You heard me. That was the other reason we picked this, because Robert Altman did make he made quite a few bad movies. I'm just, in this period, in particular, late 70s, this was around where he made Health, and he made a kind of some not so great movies in the late 70s. So he made several bad movies, but Paul Newman and Robert Altman together, you would think, how could you go wrong? Well, I'm sorry to say, film fans, that you can go very wrong. So for one thing, I still have no idea what the game was about.
Oh, no, I have no clue.
This is a 2...
I can remember if there was dice or if there was bones. I don't remember
I don't know if this 2, 3, 4 hour movie. I have no
Zero.
idea. It seemed endlessly long. And our friends Scott and Chris, who sat down and watched it with us and stayed till the end, and they thought it seemed about 4 hours too. I have no idea. When the movie's about a game, you almost need, and I know Altman doesn't like to play down to us, but you almost need the scene where someone in the movie says, this is how you play the game.
Yeah.
But everyone already knew how to play.
We had someone that going, okay, he needs an ace in order to win this game, is what you need to
Something. Because especially since it's a made-up game, there's nothing. They're rolling dice. I do know that on something, and I have no idea. Beyond that, it doesn't look very good, which is very unusual for a Robert Altman movie. It looked terrible. It has that Vaseline
someone
outside.
just smeared it on there and then left it.
Yeah, I thought
entire
that
movie.
we thought that was just going to be at the beginning, like, oh, he's hazy, he's coming out of something, it's got this Vaseline look. No, it's like that the entire movie.
Yeah.
It's got an international cast. Bibi Andersson, who was in movies,
amazing.
Who was an amazing Swedish actress who was in movies by Bergman, of all people. Fernando Rey, who was a really famous Spanish actor. I mean, there you have some huge international stars. Nothing. All these people seem like they have no idea what they're doing in this movie.
So really, what I want to do is I just like to make Angela watch bad movies because it's enjoyable and it also.
But she knows he can't get me just to watch the Blob 4.
If you're watching fantastic films all the time, then you start to split hairs and you start to notice it after a while. And so I just was like, you need to see some bad movies, and it was like, yeah, you need to be a completist. I know that it was like Robert Altman. I was like, Robert Altman, he's made, what is his worst film? And when you said, oh, he made a movie with Paul Newman that was a post-apocalyptic film, I was like, no, he did not. And she's like, yeah, it's called what is it called?
Quintet. You're still.
And I'm still like, no, that's no. No, are you sure? We looked it up and I was like, I never even heard of this. There was not even remotely on my radar. So I'm like, sure. How bad can that be? This film, as Altman does like jazz. He will film, he'll find it in his dailies, he'll watch it and grasp onto something and go, okay, that's the direction we're going to go into, and then directs the rest of the way that way. And they said in the dailies he just sat and watched trying to find the film, and we never find the film. It's just
it has no.
Paul Newman coming into this town, he finds somebody, they die, he goes.
This
and
is
he
the
kills
improv thing gone
over
wrong.
and over, and it's a total waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
And there's such immense talent on that screen. It's just, it's got to be seen to be believed. I mean, if you like Robert Altman, you got to see everything. But
Boy, but this one
wow,
was hard for even me to get through. And
it
I've seen
was
some of his films that I thought
tough.
were weaker, but man, this one was, it was also just really boring. And whole
Yeah,
sections there where I'm like, nothing's going on.
yeah.
He's just walking
A
around and
couple of
there's
times, I think they were on
nothing.
a, I think they were on a Conan the Barbarian. What was the sequel? The
Yeah, the outfits
Destroyer.
were really weird.
A
Yeah,
couple times, I felt like they drifted into their set a few times,
yeah, there were some
and
different sets going on
it was
throughout.
just
Because it's
yeah
supposed to be the
bad.
future, but it's sort of not. And
And
yeah,
even if it was like, okay, so maybe if you just grab onto this and make this, no,
and one
nope,
thing I read on the
nope.
internet, a couple things, interesting little factoids. One is that Robert Altman apparently kept the set at freezing temperatures for realism, which is sort of funny considering it's a sci-fi film. You know, and maybe that perfected maybe everyone was so cold they had no idea what was going on. And then this was listed as Newman's only sci-fi film that he ever made in his entire career, as opposed to
Yeah, I
fantasy.
guess. Yeah,
It's complete
yeah.
science fiction. So maybe there's a reason for that after this. He was like, okay, I tried that. That didn't work. Not doing science fiction again. I don't know. But it's definitely an interesting experiment. He did Popeye after this to make up with the studio. And yeah, because this was such,
Popeye.
and the Quintet was such a big bomb that it almost it hurt the career and I think killed off the career of the head of 20th Century Fox at the time because they were like,
Ouch.
yeah, that lost a lot of money for us. So
Yeah.
it's too bad, but it was how bad was it? Very bad.
It was pretty bad.
One
It
star?
wasn't just,
One star, do you think?
It wasn't just so bad. It was boring. I mean, that's the worst crime. It was just kind of like, wow.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
wasn't like bad, like fascinating.
I would have rather seen an interview with Robert Altman and Paul Newman and B.B. Anderson and just had them tell
Talk for
stories
2 hours,
of
yeah.
anything. You know, Paul Newman just explaining how he, designed that Volvo. Remember the Volvo that he did that? Remember that was pretty cool. Had a hot rod engine. Anyway,
Anyway,
yeah,
so
anything
one
would have
star,
been
one
interesting.
star.
Yeah.
I don't know
guess
how
one
you rank
star.
a how
I don't
bad
know.
is it
It just was
movie.
like, it didn't insult me. It didn't make me mad. Going into it, I knew it was going to be bad, and
Yeah.
so you just kind of sit there and just go,
Yeah, you're
huh.
not.
And even after a while, you couldn't even make fun of it because it wasn't like
Yeah.
stupid.
I was
It
disappointed
just
how bad
was.
the photography was. That's so unusual for Altman. I was just like, I don't understand why he thought
Paul
Vaseline.
Newman in furs and or these Buck Rogers shitty sets walking around. It was so bad. So bad. It was.
Okay,
Yeah, it was bad.
it was bad.
Okay, so we'll move on. Sorry, to his distinguished classics. Ding ding from 1968. This is Frank Perry's. Well, it was Frank Perry's. Directed it until they fired him, and then Sidney Lumet came in there.
Sidney Pollack, actually.
Sidney Pollack, excuse me, as the swimmer, starring Burt Lancaster as a man who comes running out of the woods in a bathing suit and then has a conversation with a neighbor in a pool. They have a pool and he decides he's going to swim his way home across the valley and going through all the neighbors' pools. And along the way,
It's 1968. That's all you need to
have
say about that plot line.
He gets.
It's
supposed to be. They said
1968.
it's Death of a Salesman with Pools. I went, really? Okay. And so along the way, he goes into the neighbors. Some of the neighbors like him. Some of the neighbors are disinterested. And some of the neighbors don't like him. And some of the neighbors are a little too young for Burt Lancaster to be flirting with because at the time he's 52. Looks great for 52, but she's young enough to be his daughter. I got it. It only took about 10 minutes into this movie, and I was like, I got it. I got your premise. I got your plot. I got it. And it's a well-regarded film, but I just was kind of halfway through.
Did
I
you
really got
expect the
bored with
ending
this
though?
movie.
That kind of surprised me a little bit. The ending
I
kind of did
knew
catch me
that
off guard.
all the elevator didn't go all the way up. So I knew that there was going to be something at the end that was not expected, and especially after the pool party where it was his popcorn maker. And
Yeah.
we had some stories, and we get a piece
Well,
of
it
kind of his life
feels,
together.
yeah, it's too bad that I would have been interested to see what Frank Perry's original cut was because he's a well-regarded filmmaker. He was an independent filmmaker in the '60s, which is pretty unusual. He did a movie
Like
called
Last
Last Summer,
Summer,
which is very
trilogy,
well
yeah.
regarded, which I've never seen. He did Mommy Dearest, which was one of his studio movies. But Sidney Pollack, after they saw the first cut of the movie, the studio was like, "Oh no, this is," and then they fired him and brought Sidney Pollack in to do some rewrites, and they shot a bunch of additional scenes. This is kind of famous for this being the screen debut of Joan Rivers in a film. For that, what that's worth. But I think I might have liked it a little bit more than you. I didn't love it. It's very dated in parts, and some of the acting. What was especially weird to me for a movie this, it's not a super low budget movie, that the acting was so uneven. Some of the people that he encounters, the acting was really.
Burt Lancaster, he kind of blows a lot of people off the screen.
Well, I know, but
so,
still, come on.
yeah,
I mean,
you-
some of it was really awkwardly bad. Like, what's going on here? And some of it was, really interesting. Yeah, he's very good in the film as well, I thought, and does look, good for his age, and guess he got into. And he said that this was his proudest movie that he made in his
Did
career.
he watch The
Really?
Leopard? Come on, man. Sweet
Well,
Smell of
Burt
Success?
Lancaster has
Come
made a
on.
lot of great
They're
movies.
great
I know.
movies.
I know. So I'm a little surprised by that. It doesn't rank with any of those. But I thought the premise was interesting. You know, it's a pretty early.
It is very cool.
For the late 60s, you know, it's kind of an early critique of suburbia and also of, you know, kind of these failed dreams and the pressures that are put on people for materialism and success. And so I liked that aspect of it. Death of a salesman in a swimming trunks is, you know, of course, what Burt Lancaster said was the premise of the movie. That's giving it a little too much credit to put yourself with Death of a Salesman with a classic like that.
A
But
few less pools, perhaps. I like the public pool one, especially. That was the best. But by the time we got there, I was a little tired.
yeah,
And I kind of got the
well,
premise,
and I think
was
the
like, yeah,
side
yeah.
plot with him and the young girl could be cut out.
That
Of course,
could've been
maybe
cut
at
out.
68 it was okay, but now you're watching it like, oh, this is uncomfortable.
But I liked the anger. I liked the people that were a little more angry with him than the ones that were happy with him. 'Cause I thought the people that were angry with him revealed a little bit more about what
what
had
was
been going
on,
and
yeah.
what had happened. And I thought it
Yeah.
was very interesting. And then, of course, and really, one of the gems of it really is the conversation he has with the young woman that he had, a mistress that he had. And by the time I got there, it was like, oh, I just yeah.
It was a little front
Get out of
heavy.
the pool.
The second half was actually more interesting than the
Yes.
first half. So they
Yes.
needed to trim that first half. Something needed to
So now
go
I'm
there.
wavering on whether or not I would give it 3.
So I'm
because
giving
I
it
really
3
enjoyed that
stars because I
second
did
half.
enjoy the second half of the movie. I don't know, that's weird. Usually it's the opposite, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed the second half enough to recommend
I
it.
could say
You're
will
on the fence,
agree
2.5,
with that.
3?
Let's do 3 on that because now that I think about it, I really did enjoy it. Yeah, you know, if they just cut
Yeah,
the
the stuff with the mistress on, but then the stuff before that, because the public pool
get rid
scene
of the
is
young
great,
girl.
you're right.
The public pool scene is fantastic.
Yeah, but all that stuff with him frolicking with the young girl at the beginning, they could have cut all of that
yeah,
out. Maybe
yeah.
some director's cut.
Blurg.
I don't know if Frank Perry's still alive or not,
right,
but anyway.
no.
Okay, so I think you.
All right, so we both split on Ready Player One. You can highly recommend Loveless, probably one of the favorites of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We split again on King's Row. We did not split on How Bad Is It with Quintet because Quintet.
It was
Gotta
bad.
be seen to believe if you can find it. And then, of course, we can barely recommend The Swimmer, just the second half. Just do the second lap there. As always, we would like to thank you for watching the show. We can follow us on, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can check us out on realfilmsnobs.com. You can listen to us on KMUZ, watch us on Corvallis, watch us in Silverton, watch us here in Salem. You can watch us online as well. And we want to thank our amazing crew. I want to thank my fabulous co-host. And as always, have a great day and great movies.